Welcome to Food Farm Talk on CFRU 93.3 FM in Guelph, Ontario, Canada, and online and on podcast anywhere in the world. A special shout out to our listeners in rural Ontario, in places or outside of places like Mildmay, Aylmer, Exeter, Hensall, Madoc, Millbrook. Thanks for listening to us. Today's show is the second of two episodes on sustainable use of fertilizers in agriculture. Today we talk about the environmental benefits and the research behind the 4R's Nutrient Stewardship system that is designed to help farmers manage their fertilizers. The 4R's stand for the right source at the right rate, right time, and right place. My name's Paul Smith. I'm one of the hosts of Food Farm Talk, along with Abdul Rahim Abdullahi and Emily Duncan. We broadcast here in Guelph from the treaty lands of the Mississauga of the Credit First Nation. The 4R Nutrient Stewardship system brings together science and industry partners and educational tools to improve farmers' access to sound crop nutrient planning. Implementing the 4R's best management practices leads to more efficient fertilizer management, higher yields, greater profits, and sustainability. Fertilizer is fundamental to feeding us all, but excess nitrogen and phosphorus have unintended consequences on soil ecosystems, water quality, and greenhouse gas emissions. Fertilizer is only one of the sources of excess nitrogen and phosphorus. Urban and rural sewage and stormwater are all big sources as well, all in support of the large and growing human population. The Gulf of Mexico, Lake Winnipeg, Lake Erie, Chesapeake Bay, and places all around the world are affected by eutrophication. That is excess algal growth due to surplus phosphorus and or nitrogen. When you add blue-green algae or cyanobacteria, they add a further human health concern as they produce toxic substances like mycocystins. A number of practices can reduce the loss of phosphorus to the environment, and you heard about some of those in the last episode, and you'll hear more today. The use of nitrogen fertilizer can contribute to greenhouse gas emissions from crop agriculture. Nitrogen can be converted to nitrous oxide through different chemical pathways due to microbial activity. And nitrous oxide is a powerful greenhouse gas with an impact of 298 times that of carbon dioxide. And many practices can reduce the conversion of nitrogen into nitrous oxide that you heard about last time, and again we'll hear about today. Lots of the great science on fertilizer and nutrient management for crop production comes from Guelph. Work in the labs of Claudia Wagner-Riddle, Ivan O'Halloran, and many other faculty. And of course, it is the grad students that do a lot of that work under their supervision. The first episode on fertilizer last time looked at how fertilizers are managed and how the 4R's system works, how it developed, and the science behind it, and who the organizational players are in the system. This week we look at the environmental issues the 4R's helps address and some of the research that has gone into it. And to do that, we talk again with McKenzie Smith of Fertilizer Canada and Nicole Penney of FS Partners. So we've asked McKenzie and Nicole to participate today because the 4R system was sponsored by the fertilizer industry and it's implemented through agronomists that advise farmers about their use of fertilizers and crop production. So thanks for joining us, McKenzie and Nicole.
No problem. No problem. Thank you.
The purpose of the environmental portion of the 4R system is to mitigate the impact of nutrients and fertilizers on the environment. And you talked about the data. So do you have data and analysis that supports your claim of the system that farmland managed under 4Rs has reduced nutrient runoff and reduced greenhouse gas emissions? And how significant are those kind of reductions? Start with McKenzie.
Yeah, definitely. We're happy to say that we do have that data to support any claims on environmental benefits of the 4R system. And the 4R framework is, of course, first and foremost science-based. So Fertilizer Canada, over the last number of years, have supported 4R research, which is really the foundation, and starts to qualify the economic and environmental benefits that are associated with different practices for different nutrients across Canada. So as you can imagine, a practice for growing potatoes and PEI is going to maybe be very different than a practice that is for growing canola in Western Canada. So this system not only supports research in general, but it supports fundamental site-specific research across the country. So in our past research network, we had 10 leading soil scientists at universities across Canada that were looking at various areas of environmental focus, including, as you mentioned, greenhouse gas and ammonia emissions, but also losses of phosphorus to water or nitrate leaching as well. And the activities of this university research are also including field trials, of course. So they're not just in the lab. They're also putting those practices to play on a field scale and monitoring emissions and yields and so on. And these trials and practices basically look at nutrient loss pathways of nitrogen and phosphorus, evaluation of best management practices for that specific crop and area. And this allows us then for the 4R Nutrient Stewardship Framework to deliver Canadian growers with information they need to enhance competitiveness and increase their productivity. So we do a lot of work at Fertilizer Canada to summarize the key findings of this research and put it together in a way that we can share that with the agricultural industry, whether it be retailers and folks like Nicole or other people that maybe she might learn that from in an ongoing continual education credit, or maybe it just is right to the grower and talking to them too about what the positive impacts that can result from doing a specific practice. So I guess specifically to Ontario and today's conversation, we've supported research at the University of Guelph over a number of years. And in terms of the phosphorus front, Dr. Ivan O'Halloran's research has demonstrated that banding phosphorus versus just broadcasting without any sort of incorporation, that doing that practice can reduce phosphorus runoff by up to 60%, which is quite significant. And then on the nitrogen side, research done by Dr. Claudia Lager-Riddle at the University of Guelph has demonstrated that for corn production in Ontario, if you combine a nitrogen fertilizer with some sort of enhanced efficiency product like a nitrification or urease inhibitor, which Nicole spoke to a little bit, which stops nitrogen from converting into another type of chemical through a different pathway and keeps it in an available form for the plant. By using this source and then also putting it in the right place in an injection, that we can increase crop yields by up to almost 20%, while also reducing nitrous oxide emissions by 40% and virtually eliminates any ammonia loss. So it's very important here that we're looking at all three. So we're looking at the yields and that we're not losing nitrogen through nitrous oxide, but we also haven't lost it through another pathway either. And so this is really the foundation of our work, and this is what comprises different best management practices that we can put together and communicate out to folks in the agricultural community in order to achieve these reductions.
Well, that's great. So it's good to hear about the work like of Claudia and Ivan and others who have contributed to that. Has there been any work on sort of modeling the net effect of practicing 4Rs
on the site-specific level and then aggregating that over, say, for example, if all Ontario farmers were under the system, the net effect in terms of reduced phosphorus or reduced nitrous oxide emissions. Has there been work like that, or is that sort of something that could be pursued in the future?
That's a great question. You actually it took a bit of my answer away from me with that. So you're nail on the head in terms of where our eyes are going and what the future holds. I think now, of course, the number one question is how much, as a whole, does that contribute to mitigating phosphorus losses to, say, Lake Erie? So we've had research, like I mentioned with Ivan O'Halloran, that demonstrates that phosphorus loss can be reduced by up to 60% if that is applied. But then what does that look like in terms of how many people are applying it? And that modeling question, and I think that is the next gap or the next step in the research that we support. I don't think, as it stands today, unfortunately, that I can take how many people are implementing it and what that reduction may look like and come up with a key number to communicate on what that looks like in terms of tons of phosphorus, say. But we do have some information from our survey and from our certification program that starts to tell us about how many people are implementing practices. So the survey that I was talking about earlier, we were able to say that 80% of Ontario corn soybean growers implement the practice that was discussed, so that they banned their phosphorus or they incorporated that they're not just broadcasting. And this is the practice that has been shown to reduce phosphorus loss by up to 60%. So we're sort of able to say this survey is statistically significant and tells us that 80% in general of Ontario growers are doing the practice, and what that looks like in terms of improvement over the course of time, and then what that could result in. But our next step, I think, is looking at modeling and the ability to put those two things together in a larger capacity and communicate that further.
Yeah, so you've got statistics in terms of participation that are not just the net number of acres certified, but also on individual practices.
We do, yeah. So our fertilizer use survey that's been going on, I think it's in its fifth year. We survey 500 growers in Western Canada and 500 in Ontario. And so we are able to dive into some specific practices to get an idea of what's going on there. But I think as we move forward, there'll be an opportunity to start to marry together the certification program and the survey in some ways to have more detailed information in this space.
So why don't we talk a little bit about that question, was that farmers can have their farms recognized as being managed according to 4R's nutrient stewardship system. So can you talk a little bit about what needs to be done for a particular farm or field to be recognized as under a kind of certified system of 4Rs?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to start, and I'm obviously interested in Nicole's point of view as well. The 4R certification program, as it stands, is a certification program for the ag retailer. So that's the folks like Nicole who work for a company that sells fertilizer to growers, but also provides nutrient recommendations and/or can also custom apply the nutrients as well. So the certification program certifies that ag retailer is implementing and abiding by the 4R principles that are outlined in the program. Now, we don't actually certify growers based on their actual individual farm. That the determination of if a farm is considered 4R is left with that certified professional judgment of the CCAs at that retail facility. So by certifying them, it's saying that we know that their advice to growers is based on 4Rs, and therefore, by their professional judgment, the farm would be deemed 4R consistent or compliant. So Fertilizer Canada does not ask for any farm-specific level information, both for confidentiality reasons, but also that information stays between the retail location and the grower customer. All we do is provide the audit at the retail location. And so having said that, Fertilizer Canada also wants to ensure that we're helping to get the word out that if a grower is implementing 4Rs and wants to be recognized for that, we don't want to stop that process, and we want to help provide that recognition. And so we have worked with our retail member companies to put together different promotional materials, whether it be like a window decal or a farm sign that you've seen from some other associations, that the retailer can then provide to their grower customers to help them communicate and be recognized that they are there for our farm. So I think that's sort of another future direction and something that's growing, but that's sort of how it stands right now.
Yeah. Nicole?
Yeah, so we, as a retailer, discuss the 4R principles and best management practices with our grower customers through our crop planning process over the winter that I was talking about before. So in order to give for our nutrient recommendations, we need to go off of the audible standards that McKenzie introduced to us previously as well. So creating a nutrient recommendation needs to be based off of a recent soil test. So within the last 4 years, we need to take into account their soil type, the crop grown, the previous crop, any nutrient credits from, say, an alfalfa or cover crop that was previously put in, as well as their yield. So having the yield data there to show what yield is produced from that field. And it's all field by field specific in our crop recommendations, our crop planning process. And through that, we're also having conversations with our grower customers on, incorporating your nutrients, or according to his or her operation, what equipment means do they have, and what processes or ways can we apply these nutrients, and then work with them to come up with the best for our process, I suppose. So are they able to ban those nutrients? Are we able to do split application for nitrogen to help mitigate the loss or the risks of loss with that nitrogen? Just checking off all of those standards through the retailer certification process. And we also discuss using nitrogen stabilizers, or discussing and then mapping any sensitive features that they have on their farms, helping with those soil tests. And then the grower does sign off on a form that we provide to them saying that he or she understands those best management practices and recommendations, and that crop plan will be followed throughout the season. And then, as we talked about before, Mother Nature likes to throw a wrench in things, and plans change, so then we kind of make some new adjustments for if they're putting a different crop in, and then we're continually updating that crop plan and having that documentation on our end. And then the same goes for our custom app business. So we are applying those nutrients, and throughout that audit, we're getting audited on that crop plan and making sure that makes sense or is according to the standards, and the recommendations are based off of a soil test, and then that follows through to the application, and then we collect the as-applied maps, making sure all of our equipment is calibrated. A lot of this we're already doing, but as McKenzie noted, it's just that documentation now and really proving of why we're doing what we're doing. And so it just all follows through the whole process of our business.
Yeah, that's great. Good to hear the rigor involved in applying it.
Mm-hmm.
So let's switch back to Lake Erie. You mentioned earlier, McKenzie, about the goal of reducing 40% of phosphorus loss by 2025, and you talked a bit about that the Highland 4R system might help in that regard, and also the crisis that was culminated in Toledo's water filtration system being closed down a few years back. So, and a lot of that problem is on the Ohio side, of course, but Ontario has a role as well. So can you talk a little bit more about how you see the 4R system assisting in terms of the Lake Erie watershed, particularly Western Basin?
Yeah, definitely. So I'll first start by saying that a lot of these practices, and either at the retail level or at the grower level, are being done. So Nicole kind of mentioned that the documentation is sort of the real challenge and the new component of this, because 4R is simply a framework and it has a brand behind it, but a lot of growers do these practices in the areas of right source, right time and place because it's common sense and it's what they've done before and it's what their retailers are advising them on, etc. And so I think the real new component here to the 4R certification program is documenting those and using things like our fertilizer use survey and our certification program to be able to say that X amount of retailers and growers are doing these practices and that has improved over time to this amount. And continuing to work with groups like the Lake Erie Action Plan Working Group that we're a part of with the Ontario Agribusiness Association to update and work with them on where the program stands, where it's going, what research we have in hopes to pull all of this together into a total impact and showcase what the agricultural community is doing and taking responsibility for in terms of being a part of the solution and seeing that the Great Lakes and Lake Erie are both improved in terms of their water quality. So, taking responsibility for what we can do and what we can communicate and showcase on what we've been doing and working with our partners to accomplish that.
Thanks through the 4R retailer certification, our staff are trained on those 4R practices and approaches to meet those sustainability goals of the economic, environmental, and social pillars. So there'll be much more awareness, and we're doing our part in that through those 4 main areas of training, recommendations, application, and documentation in that 4R retailer certification program. Farmers know the value of protecting the land and our water sources, and I think just through that continued education, awareness, the research McKenzie was talking about, and just working with the 4R retailer or certified retailers will achieve those goals.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, for the last big question, I thought we could switch to greenhouse gas emissions, and so listeners may not be aware about the nitrous oxide emissions related to fertilizer use. So that's sort of the key issue for crop agriculture is nitrogen fertilizer use and potential loss and transformation into nitrous oxide emissions, which are it's a powerful greenhouse gas emission. And Fertilizer Canada has created a protocol, nitrous oxide emission reduction protocol, or NERP, as you call it, as a way for farmers to kind of document the reductions they are implementing and then get compensated under a carbon offset system. So that's already being used in Alberta, which has a system set up, and there's potential for this to be used under a future federal offset system, which is under development, I gather. So if you can explain a bit about that offset protocol and what your hopes are for its use and its potential use for getting some compensation for farmers regarding that. McKenzie?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, happy to do that. So the protocol is newly named the 4R Climate Smart Protocol, and a motivation to communicate that the protocol can be altered and applied in any jurisdiction, whether it be from a federal standpoint or provincial or a combination of the two. And so it is the nitrous oxide emission reduction protocol, or NERP, that you referred to, but we kind of named in hopes that it would be seen that it is able to be applied across a number of jurisdictions. So the idea here, like you mentioned, it is for nitrogen, and it is for nitrous oxide emission reductions and GHG emissions. So it's a science-based protocol that is fairly complex, so I won't get too into the weeds. But it's for improved nitrogen management, and it's science-based in the sense that it uses international standards and scientific estimations and verification to say if a grower were to apply a basic, intermediate, or advanced suite of practices that have been shown to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by varying amounts, they could be compensated through carbon credits of some kind through an offset system for accomplishing this emission reduction. So, like I mentioned, it's a robust protocol designed to meet the international standards for these emissions, which we feel is very important. And at the same time, it is simple in concept and designed from a producer standpoint, hopefully in the sense that if they are implementing these practices and they have verification and sign-off from a certified professional, that this could get taken up into whatever system. So as you mentioned, Paul, the protocol, which is NERP, was originally approved for the use in Alberta's GHG management framework as a protocol for delivery of compliant quality offsets for Alberta's regulated large final emitters. So that is in the works, but the protocol, like I mentioned, can be adapted and changed for different jurisdictions. So Fertilizer Canada, we continue to work with both provincial and federal governments as they aim to develop offset protocols at either a provincial or federal level to ensure that our sort of proactive industry-led framework protocol that we've put together can align and be adopted into any offset system that's being developed. So the famous question right now is when will that come out? But Fertilizer Canada continues to work with our partners within the government to ensure that it can align and be taken up into any offset system as well. So hopefully that gives you an idea of where it came from and where it's hopefully going.
So is it operational in Alberta? Has any money changed hands to farmers as a result of it, or is that still for the future?
It has not. It's still for the future. So although it's been developed, I guess we like to say we're a little bit ahead of our time, and we have had some great learnings in Alberta on some different things that we can tweak with the protocol to make it more adoptable from both a grower standpoint and from an offset system standpoint. So we have a lot of lessons learned from Alberta, and we've made some progress there, but it's not yet an operational carbon offset system yet.
Okay, very good. Well, I wanted to thank both you, McKenzie, and Nicole for coming on the show today, and I certainly learned a lot as a result of our discussion, and I hope our listeners will learn a lot as well, and we hope that a lot of this will continue to snowball, so to speak, and more producers will be involved and more retailers as well. So thanks very much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Really appreciate it. Thanks, Nicole.
You've heard about the science behind the 4R's Nutrient Stewardship System and how that science is used to mitigate the impact of fertilizers on the environment while helping farmers produce food to feed us all efficiently and sustainably. Hopefully this helps all of us understand the complexity of agriculture and of sustainability practices. Thanks again to McKenzie Smith of Fertilizer Canada and Nicole Penney of FS Partners for appearing on the show and sharing their knowledge. My name is Paul Smith, and thanks for listening to Food Farm Talk on CFRU 93.3 FM in Guelph or on podcast. Please follow us on your favorite podcast platform and on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Tune in again next time and stay safe.